Hey guys, Ashley French here. Welcome back to my channel. On today's video, I'm going to teach you how to build your own art ledge. This is a super easy DIY project, so if you are a beginner or you're new to using power tools, this is a project you'll be able to do. In this video, I'm going to show you what tools and materials you'll need to build this. I'm going to show you the whole process step by step, and then at the end, I'm going to show you how to properly hang it on your wall. So let's get started. Okay, so the materials we're going to be using for this project are two 1x4 pine boards. These are 8 foot long. And then I also picked up a 1x2, and that is also in an 8 foot length. And I did just pick up pine. You can go with any board. I went with what was most affordable. These boards were about $6 or $7 a piece, and the smaller board I want to say was about $4. And then the tools we're going to be using for this project are a measuring tape. We're going to be using our brad nailer with 1 1/4 inch brad nails. You could also use 1 inch brad nails for this. We're using our orbital sander, and then we will be using either 150 or 180 grit, either one, sandpaper that goes on your orbital sander, and then we will be using some wood glue. All right, so now let's talk about picking out and purchasing the wood for this project. So when you go into your hardware store, you're going to notice that you usually have 2 or 3 options for boards. You're going to see what's called common board, and then you're going to see what's called select board. Those are usually the 2 most common ones that you'll see at your hardware store. And so let me tell you the difference. So common board is less expensive. That's probably going to be your most affordable option, but it tends to have more imperfections and potentially damaged boards. So when I'm using common board in a project, I just have to do a really good job of inspecting the boards in the store, picking out the best ones before I purchase them and bring them home. For this project, I actually got common board, the most affordable board. So what I do in the store, I grab my board out, and the very first thing I do is take a look at it with one eye to see how straight the board is, and you will see immediately if it's crooked or bowed, and you do not want to buy those pieces of wood. Now, I have had cases when I'm at the hardware store and I have to take down 10 or 15 boards before I find one that is nice and straight. Sometimes you won't find one that's perfect, but I try to buy the most straightest board that I can find. The other thing that I do to inspect my boards is to look at the face on both sides to make sure that there's not any major damage to them. So I'm making sure there's not big holes, maybe where a knot fell out, or I'm making sure that the board wasn't damaged on its way to the hardware store. And I also look at the grain. So keep in mind what your finished project is going to look like, and do you want a bunch of knots like this on it? If not, look for boards maybe that don't have as many, or some that are more faint. So the other thing I look at on common board, and I'll show you a little closer, are the corner edges. You can see this one's not so straight. So you want to look at the sides of it as well. And you just want to pick out boards that aren't too damaged, that are going to work well for your project. Now, let's talk about the other option, which is select board. That is going to be more expensive, but you will get a nicer board. What you'll notice with select is usually the face of them is really clean. It usually has a really nice grain pattern. Typically you won't have any like large holes caused by knots in the wood or anything like that. So depending on your project, what your budget is and what you're going for the overall look, you can make the decision to either use common board or select board. All right, and so then the next step is to just determine where in your home you plan on putting this shelf or photo ledge, and measure the area where you plan to hang it. And that is the measurement we're going to use to cut down our boards to the right length. All right, so if you plan on leaving your photo ledge the full 8-foot length that the board comes, then the first thing we need to do is make sure that all 3 of your boards are exactly the same length. So I'm gonna pick up all 3 boards and I'm going to stack them all together here on my work surface. And I'm gonna get them lined up and see if they are in fact identical. Okay, so these boards are not the same length, you can see here. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my pencil. I've got them all stacked, and on this end, I have them perfectly aligned on this end. So what I'm gonna do on this end is I'm just going to use my pencil and draw where each of them comes to. I'm gonna use my finger on this one to hold it down. All right, so this is what I should have. All right, so I'll have to straighten this one out a bit and use a straight edge. But then on this one, you can see I do have a line of exactly where I need to cut this one down to. All right, so when it comes time to actually make the cut on our board, we don't cut on the line. And the reason is your saw blade is anywhere from a 1/16 of an inch thick to maybe a little bit larger than that. And if you cut directly on the line, you will find that your board length will end up being a hair too short. So let me show you exactly how you cut your board. All right, so whenever we're cutting a really long board and you have to cut the edge and you're sliding it down and you're finding that your board wants to tip like this, that is a perfect time when we're going to be using this little gadget that comes on all miter saws, or at least it should. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place it over here, and then I'm going to get my board lined up to where I'm going to cut. I'm not turning my saw on, I'm just eyeballing where the blade is going to fall. What I'm doing is I'm making sure that my blade is going to fall right on the right-hand side of my line. You want the blade to fall on the side that is the cutoff, not the keep side, the cutoff side that we're not keeping. So your blade should fall just over the line, off the line, on the side that you're not keeping. Okay, once you have the board lined up exactly where you want it, you're going to tighten this knob down, and this is going to hold your board into place. See, so my board isn't tilting up, and I also don't have to worry after I cut and I lift up, I don't have to worry about my board tilting up or flipping up. So it's all secure now in place. Let me give you a close-up of what I mean about the blade falling just off of the pencil line. So when I bring my blade down, you can see that my blade is not actually cutting on the pencil line. It is just off to the right of the pencil line, which is my off-cut side. All right, so now all 3 boards are cut to length on both sides and they match up perfectly. All right, so now let me show you how you would cut these boards down if you don't plan to leave your photo ledge the full 8-foot length. Like in my case, I'm going to cut these down to 4 foot because I want to make a 4-foot photo ledge. So I'm simply going to use my measuring tape and my pencil, measure each one and mark at the 4-foot mark. All right, so next I want to draw a really straight line that my saw can follow. So you can use either a carpenter's triangle or a speed square, and I'm just going to line this up right on the edge here. All right, so a little tip that I want to share, once I draw my line, something that I like to do is I like to draw an X, an X on my off-cut side. So this is the side I'm keeping. This is my 4-foot length. This is the side that I will be discarding. So I draw the X and I know that my blade is going to go on this side of my pencil line. And then just like my other boards, I'm stacking them all up and I'm looking that they are all cut the exact same height, which they are. They're the perfect length. So now we're going to move on to the next step. All right, so once your boards are cut, we're going to move on to the next step, and that is giving your boards a light sanding. I am just using my orbital sander here. This is what it looks like. I do have the little dust collection bag attached. I've got my battery inserted, or if you're using a plug, a corded sander, you just want to have it plugged in. And then for the actual sandpaper itself, I'm using a 150 grit. For this, you could use anything from 150 to 180. If you only have 220, that would work too. All we're doing by sanding is we're smoothing out the surface and we're removing some of those little frayed pieces of wood that I can see on the edge. So when you're putting your sandpaper on your sander, you do want to make sure that the holes on the paper line up with the holes in the sander. And the reason for that is because that's actually where the sawdust has a place to escape while it's sanding. All right, and then whenever I'm sanding, I do like to wear some safety glasses, and I like to wear a mask or put some kind of protection over my nose and my mouth so I'm not breathing in the particles. And then I'm just gonna simply go back and forth, swiping over each side of the board. So all 4 sides of each board. I also wanted to share that if you don't own an orbital sander, you can get the job done using a sanding block or even just a simple piece of sandpaper. And sometimes even what I like to do, once I've used my orbital sander and I'm done, I actually like to then take my sanding block and then just kind of lightly hit the edges to get any additional little frayed pieces of wood off the edges. All right, so once your boards are sanded, we are going to lay our boards out and we're going to just kind of dry assemble them. So one of your 1" by 4" boards is going to be the bottom of the ledge. The other 1 by 4 will essentially be the back of your ledge. And then your small 1 by 2 here is going to be the front of your ledge. So what I like to do is I like to kind of assemble it and then take a step back and I look at the face grain and what is going to show. So you can kind of flip it around and see, is one side better than the other? In this case, I think I'm going to flip this one so that the wood knots are not as prominent. And then once I kind of figure out the assembly, then I'm going to grab my wood glue and my nail gun. All right, so first let's make sure our nail gun is loaded up with nails. So I'm going to remove the battery just to make me more comfortable and to know that it can't go off. And then I'm just pulling this lever here at the bottom. And I'm going to take out, I had some bigger nails in there. I'm going to take those out. I'm going to put in my 1 1/4 inch nails. I'm pushing them to the front and then all the way up. And then I simply just push this bottom part, the magazine, back up. And I'm going to then put my battery back in and it's ready to go. Okay, so when it's time to assemble, we are actually going to stand this whole thing up. So essentially I want it like this so that we can have a flat surface to put our nails in. And so knowing that it's going to be like this, I'm going to lay this down. And the first thing I'm going to do is put a line of wood glue. And I don't want to put too much. A thin line will do the trick. Okay. And now we're going to take our board. We're going to place it on top. All right, and then I'm just kind of going down to the ends to feel like if it feels lined up. And so I'm gonna start on the right side. I'm gonna make sure the right side is lined up. And I'm gonna put my first nail in the farthest right side. Okay, once you get that first nail in, the rest is very easy. All right, so now on this side, I can pull it, make sure it's lined up. And I'm gonna put another nail in. And something that I want to point out to you guys, on your nail guns, I'm gonna set this down. On your nail guns, you'll actually see it shows you exactly where the nail is going to come out, which is really helpful. All right, so I'm gonna hold this down. Okay, and then now I can put a couple in the middle. Okay. Now, if you see any excess wood glue, you do want to try to wipe that away as soon as possible. The reason that you want to do it as soon as possible is because when you go to stain this or paint it later, the wood glue will interfere. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing with the front ledge. I'm going to stand up my shelf and grab my wood glue. Okay, I want to double check what side is going to be the face side facing out. And I'm going to put the nail in the right side first. Okay, and then I'm just going to wipe up the wood glue. Okay, and there you guys have it. All right, so you do want to allow the wood glue to completely dry. So I'd say give it a couple hours And then you can either paint this, you can stain it, you can leave it totally natural. You could put a clear coat on it so that it looks natural, but it's protected. So you have a lot of different options. Now I'm planning on staining mine, so I will show you that process, but I am going to give it a couple hours now for the wood glue to dry, and then we'll come back and we will stain it. Okay, so once your wood glue is dry, you just want to get it cleaned off really well if you're going to stain it or paint it. So I just like to use a tack cloth, and I just give it a light wipe down. And a tack cloth is really cool. It has like a waxy substance on it, and it actually, all the particles, sawdust, any of that will stick to this. So I'm just going to give it a good wipe down, and then we can start. I'm actually going to stain mine. If you are wanting to paint it, all you have to do is get it wiped down really well and then just start painting. You'll want to use a paintbrush and you can just start painting, but I'm going to show you the steps if you're wanting to stain it like me. All right, so I just got a little table set up here, and I am going to be staining mine. And so what I have here is a pre-stain wood conditioner. I always use this on my wood before I stain it. You don't have to, but I highly recommend it. What this will do is it preps the wood to take the stain, and it prevents blotchiness in the stain. So if you've ever stained wood before, you may have seen where it looks uneven. Some places are darker than others. This will help prevent that from happening. All right, so once your pre-stained wood conditioner is dry, and it really only takes, you could start as soon as 30 minutes, or you could wait a couple hours after you apply the pre-stain before you come back and actually apply the stain. For me, it's been about 45 minutes, and I'm gonna go ahead and just get started with my stain. So again, I've got my gloves on. I'm just using an old t-shirt that was cut up, and I am using, what is this? This is dark walnut. This is the color that I chose. I thought it would look good in my son's room. And so I'm gonna do the same thing like I did for the pre-stain. I'm just going to dip my rag and start staining this. So to hang the shelf on the wall, I'm going to be using a level. Then I'm going to be using my impact driver and my drill. I've got a pencil, measuring tape, some blue tape, and my stud finder. I do want to say that if you don't have both an impact driver and a drill, that is totally fine. You can do this project with a drill only. You'll just need a small drill bit that is smaller than the width of your screw. And then you'll just need a Phillips head bit that you can change out on your drill. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the wall where I plan to hang the photo ledge, and I'm going to mark where the center of that wall is. All right, so now that I've measured the center of the wall, I'm now going to mark on the wall where the studs are. All right, so now I'm going to measure and mark the center of my shelf also, because when I go to hang this, I'm going to use the center marking on the shelf to line up with the center mark I made on the wall. And that's how we're going to ensure that our shelf is perfectly centered on the wall we're hanging it on. All right, so now I'm gonna take my shelf, I'm gonna hold it up on the wall, and I'm gonna line the marking on my shelf with the marking on the wall, which will put it right in the center of the wall. Once I do that, I'm going to mark on the shelf where the studs would be. So I marked, there's a stud here. I'm gonna go straight down, and I'm gonna draw a circle right in the center of the back part of my shelf. And then I'm gonna do the same here. I'm gonna go straight down from where I marked the stud, and I'm gonna draw a circle right on this back part of the shelf. So this is what your marking should look like on the shelf. I used my drill, which has a small drill bit on it here, and I drilled a hole into the back of the shelf where we had drew the 2 dots where the shelf had lined up with the studs. This is just going to ensure that the screw will go into the shelf very easily. So I drilled both of those holes. Then I took my screws and I used my impact driver and I just I drilled them into place so that when I go to hang the shelf on the wall, they'll already be there, and it'll help us since we will only have the one hand available to drive the screws into the wall. Now I'm going to line up the center marking on my shelf with the center marking on the wall. I'm going to grab my drill here. All right, so you want to get it to the height that you're going for. And then we're going to drill in only the first screw. All right, once you get the first screw in, then we're going to grab our level, set it on the back, and then bring this side down. And then once you have it level, you can drill in your last screw. All right, so there you have it. I hope that this DIY project was easy to follow. If you enjoyed this and you'd like to see more beginner-friendly DIY projects, please let me know in the comments below because I am thinking about incorporating more videos like this onto my channel. I will link all the supplies and materials I linked below. And if you want to find me or chat further, come find me on Instagram at Mrs. Ashley French. I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you thought, and I will see you guys soon.